Hello guys, Merry Christmas and welcome to my Christmas build video. Recently I was looking through the Imperial War Museum photo archive and I found some images like these which inspired me to make this Christmas build. This is the Sherman M4A1 variant from, I think you pronounce it Asuka. They are apparently quite famous for their Sherman kits, so I thought I would build one. Originally I had a different idea for this Sherman, but then I thought I would build it as part of this Christmas build. One thing to note about these kits is they don't come with any marking suggestions or decals, and this particular kit also comes without photo etch. So if you haven't seen a kit from this company before, here are the instructions. They're fairly easy to follow. Steps are labelled in Japanese and in English, although the folding sheet format is a bit strange because if you put them together to make a booklet, the steps are out of sequence, so you just have to follow one sheet at a time. The lower hull of the tank has to be built up, it's not bathtub style, but it goes together well, there are no gaps. You can see there's a sort of internal firewall there which gives good bracing. And although you can see lots of ejector pin marks there, they are of course on the inside of the kit, so they're not visible. And with the basic structure of the lower hull made, you can see it's very sturdy, and the upper hull section goes over that very nicely indeed. Very good fit. The transmission cover has more parts than something like, say, a Tamiya kit, but that does enable it to have a lot more detail as well. And I imagine that part of that design is to enable the company to just make small changes to different kits to have different variants of the Sherman. So this M4A1 version of the Sherman was called the Sherman II by the British. One distinctive feature of this variant is that rounded, entirely cast upper hull. And over 6,000 of this version were produced before it was replaced by the upgunned 76mm version. Production started in 1942 and it saw action with the British 8th Army at the Second Battle of El Alamein. And of course that battle resulted in a decisive victory for the Allies, and really that became a turning point in the war in the Western Desert. In terms of the model kit, I feel like there isn't a huge amount to say. It went together extremely well, the fit was very good. And if you've built any Sherman variant before, or even any of the M3 variants, lots of the steps and lots of the parts will be familiar to you. One thing I did notice when building up the bogies here for the suspension is that they are designed to be workable and movable. Some kits kind of have that as a feature, but in reality it becomes hard to glue them and have them movable. But in this kit it was very easy to build them and have them both strong and movable, which is a nice bonus. The tracks supplied are rubber band style tracks. They're slightly unusual in that each side is made up of two sections. I'm not quite sure why they've gone with this process, but it doesn't cause any major problems. And here you can see the built kit with a layer of Tamiya grey primer. There are a couple of touch-ups I need to do, for example filling this gap down here. In terms of the camo schemes, I wanted to use the AK Real colours which I bought recently, and I thought a light mud base colour would work well, with either olive green or blue-black disruptive patches. In the end I went for the blue-black. I know this scheme is slightly later than the pictures which I showed at the beginning of the video, but I like it, I like the colour scheme, so I'm using it. I tried to replicate the approximate ratio of the blue-black to the base colour, but I didn't try to follow any official camo scheme. And I masked this using blue tack, which gives a fairly straight edge without giving that razor sharp edge which masking tape would give. So because this kit does not include decals, I went through the spare decals bag and I found these from previous British armour builds, and then basically I just picked out a few unit markings which I liked. These might not be 100% accurate, but I tend to go with what I feel looks good. The detail painting of things like the tools was done using Vallejo paints. I find them much easier to brush paint compared to other brands. I didn't want to add a huge amount of weathering, but I did want to use some of this dry mud acrylic paste from AK Interactive. It's this slightly thick brown liquid which you can thin with water, and I applied that quite liberally on the underside of the hull behind the wheels. The aim here was to build up some texture, and then once that had started to dry, I used a damp brush to blend the edges so they weren't so abrupt. To be honest, I wasn't very happy with this final effect that it gave me, so I decided to add some pigments over the top. And I chose this North Africa dust pigment, and I applied it liberally over that dried paste, hoping that the texture would grab some of the pigment. I did this over a clean sheet of paper so that I could collect any of the pigments that fell off and reuse them. To be honest, even by the end of this I wasn't super happy with the effects, but I did decide to leave them as they were. For dust effects on the upper part of the tank, I used some of this dry mud oil paint. This is the Abteilung 502 paint. I've been using it quite a lot in my recent videos. It only needs a very small amount, and then you blend it into the paintwork. As you can see, the effect looks quite stark at first, but the more you blend, the more subtle it becomes. And it's a good idea to start with small amounts like I did here. You can always add more later. And by putting some of this effect over the decals here, like the number of the tank, it blends them in a bit more and makes them look more like part of the paintwork. I went especially heavy with this effect at the rear of the vehicle. And of course I applied it on other surfaces too, so here on the turret around the hatches. And also at the front and the back of the vehicle. One thing I also tried was to dampen a brush in a small amount of thinner and then streak it downwards through the oil paint, removing the paint, and that kind of gives an impression of a disturbance in the dust. For the tracks, after painting them black, I gave them a dry brush of a silver paint, trying to hit the high points which would be polished clean because they're in contact with something else. And those tracks fitted very easily. They were perhaps a little bit too long. And the final step was to add a small message influenced by this photo here, and a couple of figures from the spare parts box. Okay, and before I show you the final images, let me take a moment to say thank you very much to my Patreon supporters. Thank you very much guys, your contributions are greatly appreciated, and of course everything that I get through Patreon does go back to buying things for the channel. So thank you very much for your support guys. Okay guys, and that concludes my Christmas build of the Sherman tank. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. I had great fun building this kit, and although a Sherman isn't exactly an unusual model kit to build, I did enjoy putting it in a slightly different context, so I hope you enjoyed that too. As always, there are lots of videos coming up, and here is a quick preview of what you might expect in 2021. So guys, until next time, Merry Christmas, have a great holiday, and I hope to see you soon.